I should be like you, Mel.
Ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to Cherry AM, and of course, the second morning of doing this. And I have got Mr. Ollie Hudson next to me. How you doing, Ollie?
Not bad, thanks, Craig. How you doing this morning?
Yeah, all good, mate, all good. And we were just talking off air about, there's a bit of a drag, isn't there, during the summer with regards to the lack of Premier League action. It's just like the last game of the Premier League, final game against Leicester, and it's just like, what are we doing this summer? Yeah, there's not much on, but of course we've got TST, we've got the summer series, but we've also got a lot of transfer news as well. But just quickly, good morning to Joe Davison. He said, morning up the cherries. And hello to Malcolm Chiverton, who said, good morning, Craig and Ollie. So, yes. Well, I'll tell you what, let's discuss one player who was in the news all yesterday afternoon and through to the evening. It was broken on Sky Sports News by Mark McAdam. So a reputable source. Mark said in his first address, he did turn around and say that it was just an inquiry at the time. Other sources have said that there is a transfer fee that has been put down. But to be honest, Ollie, this is a concern, isn't it, mate?
Yeah, absolutely it is. I think we're already currently struggling with the potential loss of a couple of big defenders, as we already know. I think if we lose Zabarnyi as well, his growth in the last two seasons with Bournemouth has been awesome. So yeah, it'd be a real sad day to lose him, unfortunately. But as you said, at the moment it's speculation. So I guess we can see how far that goes, right?
Well, exactly, like Mark said, and Mark is the person to listen to with all these rumours. It seems as if it's just an inquiry from PSG. Of course, Dean Howson has already gone to Real Madrid to link up with them ahead of this Club World Cup. It sounds like it's going to be a bit more of a successful tournament than what we saw. I remember when I was younger, I think it was 1999. There was that Club World Cup that Man United, didn't they? They pulled out of the FA Cup for. And
that's right. Yeah,
it was a complete and utter farce in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, look, I think they're going to continue to try and build new things right around the Premier League in the summer to keep players busy. I think was it last season or the season before, there was big conversations around a number of games that players were playing anyway in a season, and whether that should be increased just for the intensity on the players' behalf, But yeah, we see these things being created left, right, and centre, right? And I think we've got some exciting things to come this summer. But yeah, I think that we are entering into a period of uncertainty where AFCB are concerned for 2025, 2026 for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, Kirkes to Liverpool has been mentioned quite a lot. And Zabarnyi, if PSG come calling, the French league, I've got to be honest, is not a particularly strong league. However, and this is the big however, PSG are one of the best teams in the world, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think if you were Zabarnyi, would you look at that and say no and stay with Bournemouth?
Mm,
How would you consider that as a player in the Premier League for a club that didn't quite make the Europeans, are going to struggle for the next 2 seasons with the growth period that they're in?
yeah.
How do you compare both of those squads, and who would you rather go and play for?
That is the big thing for me, is that there is this Club World Cup that I believe PSG they're also involved in, so Zabarnyi will want to link up with that if he is to go there. Paul's made a very good point though here. Another 50 million. I trust our recruitment team. Now, we were also discussing this as well because
Yeah.
although it seems like our team are being ripped to shreds a little bit at the moment, and it's not just the defenders that are being talked about by less reputable sources than Mark McAdam, let's call them that. But it is something that we've created because of our recruitment team. Our recruitment has been so good that there is always going to be this talk about players like Zabarnyi and Kirkes and, of course, I mentioned the others, Semenyo, Clive, because we bought so
Yeah.
well, they do see, AFC Bournemouth as a little bit of a stepping stone. I know it's horrible to
Sure.
think of us
Yeah.
like that.
Well, and the thing is, it's not all of a sudden now. It always has been the case, right? We've always had good players come through Bournemouth,
Mm,
similar to how Southampton have, and it's been similar for both clubs on the south coast to develop these players, and they tend to go off to the bigger squads. This is
yeah.
something that's been happening for a number of years. The only difference is this year and last year is the level of player that we're bringing in. We're then
Hmm.
increasing them to a much better level. Hence why
Yes.
the increased transfer fees. Hence why the better recruitment, and it is allowing us, although we're losing these good players that have had the spotlight on them for 2 seasons or a season, it is allowing us to churn out and get bigger and better players.
Mhm.
We're now looking at players. This will probably come up again in other Cherry AMs, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
Marseille and Juventus and, teams from around the world that we may not have had a look in at previously. So I think although it is daunting, it's super exciting. I think we have to have trust in the team and trust in the
Yeah.
squad and trust in the plan of what we had and what we've begun 2 years ago, for sure.
Years ago, we was used to swimming around in the same pond as Morecambe and Dagenham and Redbridge, and
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
crazy even when you even say it. But
Yeah.
there is, talk of several signings coming in at this moment in time. Again, not from reputable sources, but I'm sure that Frano is doing his homework, even though he is out in America at the moment on TST. Here's a very, very good point, and I'll just touch on this as well. Malcolm said not only the recruitment, but how Andoni gets the best out of them for their development. Now, this
Yeah. Agreed.
concerns
Yeah.
me because I agree with Malcolm 100% there. But would Andoni think, well, that maybe because these are the players that he's bought in to the club, or Frano and Pinto are bought into the club, he's actually helped move them on to bigger and better things, and improve them as players. Will he think, well, do I really want to start again with that risk of failing? We've seen it at other clubs as well, on a bigger scale. For example, I think Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson got to a point where he didn't have that pull, and I think that will happen at some point. That
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
mm,
I think it definitely has the possibility of happening, but I don't think we're there for a number of years. And I think
mhm,
Andoni entered this knowing what was coming. I don't think he knew this was going to be a 3-year plan, get them into the Euros, make my big quick bit of money and get out of here. I don't think that was ever Andoni's vision or plan moving into Bournemouth, right?
Well,
I think there's much bigger plan here at stake, and I think he's undergoing it. And yeah, we have to follow the increased levelling up that AFCB are going through, I reckon.
it's exciting because it
Yeah.
is growing this football club. Of course, the infrastructure work going on the outside as well. Of course, we're going to increase the stadium. We're going to, improve hospitality. We're going to improve our reach around the world. So there is a lot of things to be excited about. And Andoni maybe is going to look at that as the future project. But again, one of these big boys, it does worry me that we are swimming in a pool of sharks when we're maybe just a little goldfish. But Malcolm has said that is Andoni's challenge to maybe feed the goldfish and, make it a shark. Or put a fin on its tail and what do you call it? Make it look like a shark anyway.
Yeah.
Dan has said here, have we been linked with anyone? There was a couple of players as well that we was mentioning the other day, weren't we? And to be honest, there's nothing really solid, is there?
No, at the moment there isn't. I'm just going to do a quick search now while we're talking because I want to make sure that nothing's happened since the last 24 hours. There were a couple of talks that I noticed going on with a left back from Marseille and a centre back from Juve. How far they've gone and how much speculation that is, I can't tell you, but definitely some things that have been popping up. I think, as you mentioned, Craig, our recruitment department, I don't have any lack of faith in. There's no doubt that we've got our eyes on people and we've got things and plans in process. Ready to cover the players that we've lost or will be losing over the next couple of months.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think the recruitment at this football club has been first class, and
I
that is
think in
what we should.
regards to Zabarnyi, I struggle to see him leaving. I really do. I think, given the fact that he had 37 appearances last season, 14 clean sheets. He's had another 36 this season. He's been playing more for his international team. Everything for him has been going better since being at Bournemouth. I'm not sure if he'd give up that game time and go to PSG. I don't know how sensible that would be for him at this time in his career, but
Yeah, and that is another thing that these players have to look at. Now, this is an interesting point Paul's made. He said, if we made Europe, these players would have left. I actually, but throughout that running, I kept turning around and I kept saying, Europe was always a pipe dream. It was always a pipe dream. It was always something that you thought that would be just amazing to go to the back end of Moldova and, go and experience a game against Sheriff Tiraspol of Transnistria, I think they are. I've never heard the place. I couldn't point to it on a map, but wouldn't that be amazing? But more and more last season, I kept saying, I think Europe might actually be a necessity. And the thing is I kept thinking that we needed to get into Europe to actually keep these players. But Paul's made a very good point. Do you agree with Paul, or do you agree with me that if we had got into Europe, Ollie, we would have maybe been able to keep, maybe not Howson, but Kirkes for another season, Zabarnyi, if his head has been turned a little bit towards this move to PSG that's being linked, then maybe.
Look, I think absolutely. Yeah, we absolutely could have kept these players and gained bigger names, maybe, if we'd have made Europe. But how detrimental would that have been for our other players, for our backup players, for our sub bench? Can everyone in that squad really take an increased level of games, an increased intensity of games during, off-peak seasons? When we're really trying to gain our team and our squad back, and all of a sudden we're out and playing in Europe, I'm not sure how beneficial that would have been for us next season. I think we have to be open-minded, and the players have to be open-minded in the fact that this was an incredibly fast progression for Bournemouth. I don't think anyone was expecting it to be this powerful and this quick over 2 seasons. And I think there needs to be a level of understanding that, this is a growth period and we need to have the players grow with us. And if they want to leave and go to bigger clubs, fine. And that's always been a thing at Bournemouth, but we're on a plan here. And I think if the players stick with us, they will be rewarded for that in getting their European position next season, season after.
Yeah.
For sure. Definitely. I think players like Semenyo, he's already made it very clear that he doesn't really want to be going anywhere. I think players like Sinisterra, I think, these players that are staying with us at the moment, I'm not 100% sure they would have benefited from leaving and going to bigger clubs and straight away. I just don't think that would be a benefit for them.
It's like when I went to the Amsterdam Arena, and everybody's probably heard this story before, but I'll give it again. I spoke to a gentleman there. In fact, I met, his his uncle on the train beforehand in just what was probably a freak meeting, a complete surprise. And I was speaking to the guy who was doing the tours at the Amsterdam Arena, or the Johan Cruyff Arena, I should call it. And he turned around and he said, Justin Kluivert left Ajax too early. And I completely agree with that, because he was in his development. He was, of course, in the young Ajax team, which is without a shadow of a doubt one of the best academies in the whole world. Look at where most of the Netherlands players come from. They normally come from that academy. And he left a little bit too early, and he was a little bit out in the cold. He was going from club to club to club to club, and now he's found his place at Bournemouth. It would be in his best interest, honestly, for him to stay. And maybe that story needs to resonate with a couple of these other players, these couple of other youngsters who are thinking, well, actually, maybe, this club, this big name is looking at me. I should go there. I've always wanted to play for Juventus, Real Madrid, PSG, but am I going to get my game time? Am I going to be frozen out? Is it going to be a Jack Grealish situation? That's not fun for anybody. And I think I do kind of agree, but sometimes disagree with Paul's statement. I think Howson would have gone regardless. Howson, we know, is probably a different level, but I think, other players maybe would have stayed. But I think some players will stay anyway.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
We've got Dan here. He's saying, I heard Kepa permanently.
Also heard this and read this. He was a similar stance to Semenyo, wasn't he? Saying that he wants to stay and run it through with Bournemouth, which is awesome. Awesome to hear from a keeper of his standard.
Yeah. And of course, we just need to make sure that we agree everything with Chelsea. But I think Chelsea probably, from what it sounds like, want to offload him to make way for Todd Boehly to spend loads and loads and loads of money that he hasn't got. So we shall see what happens with that. Joe has asked a question. I'll put this to you. Are you getting nervous about Andoni's future if these high-profile players continue to get pinched?
No, I'm not. I think Andoni didn't enter into the club with all these high-profile players. I think it was created under Andoni's orchestration and under Andoni's management. So, again, I have full faith in the management team and the recruitment squad behind Andoni. And I genuinely believe that the next 2 years, all we're going to see is the same again, but just with different name players. Different name players that people didn't know about before necessarily, and they've come through Bournemouth. They've made a real impact over 2 seasons, and they're getting pinched and bought again. And by that point, they'll be our squad B. They'll be our sub players, and we'll be entering into Europe. And yeah, it's an exciting time for the club. I've got no doubts for Andoni at all.
And Malcolm has said here as well, the main work will come after the Club World Cup. In the second part of the transfer window, trust the process.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with that. Frano and Pinto have done a fantastic job in their recruitment, finding these players. And Donny will say, this is what I want, and they will go out and find them. And it is first class. And it's crazy to think as well, Simon Francis, a player that we signed all those years ago from Charlton Athletic, is showing that he is an absolutely outstanding scout, recruitment partner.
But
He
also
is
shows that dedication to the club that we've just been talking about.
exactly.
They're never leaving. The backing of the community feel behind a club like Bournemouth, and he's really been stuck in it the whole time.
Oh, definitely. And there's players as well from years, throughout the years, you know, dare I say it, Steve Cook. I think Steve Cook will probably return to this football club, when his playing days are over, because players love this football club. It is, it's a little bit different to a lot of other teams. There's that homely feel, there's that community spirit, and the players are all, especially those players that got us up the first time round in 2015. After, of course, that game against Charlton Athletic at the Valley. If the club let Andoni spend the money, he will be okay with that. Um, do you know what? I saw some stupid rumours, and again, this is all. I'm sure if I turned around to Mark McAdam and said, what is this with regards to, there was this talk in the press. I can't even remember what website it was. It was something like Tifo Football, something like that. Do go and check it out. Go search for it. And they were turning round and said that Bournemouth have got anything between 100 million, maybe from the incomings, that's possible, to 370 million. Um, I don't know where they get these figures from. Free, but I would be absolutely petrified if I saw this football club spending 370 million. I started panicking, to be fair, and to be honest, it has come off. It's a gamble that come off, but it could well have been another Jordan Ibe when we spent 40 million on Evan Nilsson, because I thought that is a lot of money for this football club that used to
Yeah,
rely
yeah,
on frees and loans, once upon a time.
yeah. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And you bring me back to a Jordan Ibe time where it was
Mm,
15 million, wasn't it? The
yeah.
history purchase of the club, and what tremendous season to follow that was. So I also had the same feelings with Evan Nilsson.
Yeah.
I think his first few games proved that he was a Cherries boy, right? So I think he's
Yeah.
got a little bit more to show, and there's a couple more things that he needs to pull out the bag next season to really
hmm
solidify his spot. But yeah, the hope's there for sure.
Malcolm said that figure was AI generated. I wouldn't put it past you. It was probably, okay, we've got the figures for Chelsea, we've got the figures for Manchester United, for Arsenal, and all that.
Yeah,
Bournemouth, we don't know much about them. So what we'll do is we'll just put it into the AI machine, and up it pops with that figure. I don't know where that figure even come from. What the
no,
justification. Of course, it
I,
just
I don't think we'll push. I don't think we'll push a spend of 90 million. No,
yeah.
maximum. I don't think. I don't think we'd go over that. But we'll see. We'll see. Who knows? But
I'd be scared if we were spending 90 million, because, of course, if the risk to this club, if Manchester United spend 90 million, well, bad example actually, Man United's probably, but Man City spend 90 million and that's spent on flops, they
well,
can
this is the
blow.
thing. Yeah, yeah. And I think it needs to be spent uh, very sensibly, and
Yeah,
we need to be planning for the next 2 seasons with how we spend it. We've had a good season. Let's be focused on how we're going to spend that money. Let's not be throwing 50 million or 40 million at another striker. Let's reinforce our defence. Let's
yeah,
get another winger in. Let's really really create a squad B and a good sub bench just in case.
Well, Malcolm said people don't know anything outside of Bournemouth. That is why it's pure speculation. Yes, that is true. Just looking at the current defence, of course, at the moment, Julio Sola, very highly rated. We saw him briefly against Leicester. I really, really like him. We saw him against West Bromwich Albion in the FA Cup as well. He looks a very exciting left back. Of course, on the right, we've got Adam Smith, so that's not too much of a worry. We've got Max Aarons as well. Whether or not Max will get, his chance here is questionable. But we have got Julian Orejo as well. I think the jury's out a little bit on Julian. But, in that centre-back partnership at this moment in time, if Zabarnyi goes, really we are down to James Hill and Marcos Senesi. I think James Hill could make the step up. Do you think?
Yeah, he'll have to. Senesi is still out injured, is he not?
No, he was back for the Leicester game.
Back for the last Leicester
But
game.
yeah,
Right.
a little bit rusty in all honesty, to be honest, mate. But
So yeah, I think James Hill is going to have to. He's going to have to shine, isn't he?
yeah,
He had a couple of performances. What was it? Maybe 10 appearances.
I think it
Something
was
like
around
that.
about 10. Yeah, I think it was about 10. He did put in a real good shift. When he did come on in certain games, he did start a couple of games as well. And I think, he does look, a very good player.
Yeah.
With
What I'm
regards,
interested
yeah,
in
10
to know is
appearances.
how much are we going to rely on our youth team, bringing players up from our younger squads? Because there is a
Mm.
lad, um, what's his name? Welsh
And
lad, Archie Harris is his name,
yes.
and I think there's plans to bring him through into the first team this next season. So
Hmm.
it's going to be interesting on how we plan on backing up that defense. Are we going to look at those younger players? Is Andoni going to try and bring in some new talent or back up from our younger squad?
Do you know what? I really like the fact that we are bringing in players that are joining that of what we would call the youth development side at the moment. Eventually is going to be academy, and what we'll find is that we'll be picking up players from the likes of Chelsea, Arsenal,
Yeah,
Spurs when maybe they drop out. We'll also be able to, challenge the likes of Southampton and Portsmouth and other clubs in the region to, the youngsters that they've had, the benefit of being able to capture before us because of the state of their academies. So it's exciting times. I think Andoni will probably trickle players through.
I
That's
think
how
so.
I feel. I think, Ben Winterburn, of course, played quite a few games last season, looks a very good player. I think he'll get a bit more chance. And I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that, homegrown players getting a little bit more
Yeah,
opportunity,
yeah,
rather than just bringing players in. Of course, Ben has been, here since, his young days. And, I think it would be really nice for him to, I don't know whether or not he was born and grew up in the area, but, it'd be really good for him to actually get, more opportunities. Malcolm, spot on. Seriously, now we will more than likely get players that are a little unknown, similar to Brighton. That's what we've really been doing, and what Brighton's been doing. One of the best run clubs in the country, without a doubt. And Saints have got a good centre back. I think his name is Baylis Harding. So yeah, well, of course, Southampton. Didn't particularly do very well last season, so we should say. But we there's no reason why we shouldn't have a little look. Um, Tyler Diblin, of course, is the player that everybody's been going on about from Saints, but there is other players there that, you know, good young talent that maybe we should be having a little look at. But I tell you what, I think we probably should conclude this. But Illia Zabarnyi, do you think he will be a Cherries player come August? Do you think that this inquiry will come to nothing?
I'm going to call it. I think he'll stay.
Bloody
I
hope
think he'll
so.
stay.
I really hope so. The biggest worry of mine is that this is maybe something that's been born out of agent talk. Sometimes agents will go out there and try and get the best deal for the player, but also the best idea for themselves, deal for themselves. So I worry that maybe this is an agent gone to PSG. Would you be interested in Zabarnyi? They've made an inquiry to AFC Bournemouth. Absolutely fine, nothing wrong with that, but that could have alerted a lot more of the Sharks. So, yeah, that's my concern. But Malcolm agrees with you. Zabarnyi will be a Bournemouth player in August. Well, I'll tell you what, let's end on that then. So, yeah, Zabarnyi, you're staying. You will be a Bournemouth player in August. Ollie, thank you again for coming on. I
Pleasure.
shall see you tomorrow for some more Cherry AM. And yep, make sure everybody you hit the like, subscribe, and the bell button below.
I should be like you, Melvin.